Hey, welcome back to High Cheese with Darren Maloney. Today is February 11th, 2022. And boy, there's so much to get into today. And let's go right into it. I get a lot of questions about economic nationalism. I'm an economic nationalist, and some people have been texting me or emailing me saying, "What is an economic nationalist?" So let me just keep it nice and simple and tell you where coming from, and then we can just move on to some really good things today. Economic nationalism is a form of nationalism that prioritizes the protection of a nation state domestic interest and independence in the face of globalism. It often does this by reducing the imports from foreign lands, along with foreign investments, and favors domestic trade and investment. It is related to protectionism, though the two are not necessarily mutually inclusive. Some liberal commentators considered economic nationalism to be synonymous with mercantilism and see it as a threat to the liberal and globalist economic world order. So here's what I believe. I believe that your trade policies, your tax policies should benefit everyone, the wealthy, the middle class, the lower class, everyone. And I think you have to make a concerted effort to protect the middle class. You cannot have a thriving economy without a thriving middle class. And that's the problem with the globalists. The globalists want two tiers. They want those at the top making an extreme amount of money and everybody else that's just fighting for the scraps that are thrown their way. Any good economy, you have a balanced economy. But the globalists don't want that. And I want to make it clear, when you're talking about economic nationalism, you want to benefit all of your citizens. That includes Black, white, Asian, Latino, everyone. I want everyone to do well. Economic nationalists want Blacks, whites, Indians, everyone to do well. And let me just give you a couple of examples. Like, for example, I would love to see our medications brought back to the United States. I think it's in our best interest to have all of our medications made here, not in outside countries. And I remember it was 2 years ago, I think, when Trump was fighting with the Chinese. I think one of the Chinese ministries came out and said, "Hey, look, if we have to, we can always cut off your supply of meds." Well, that's great. How about all those poor diabetics on metformin that's being made in China? Are they going to suddenly die? Is that good for your country? So this is why I want those type of things brought back here. Another example is, I don't know if you remember 2007, 2008, maybe right before then, when George Bush wanted to sell the operations of our ports to a company based in the UAE. And again, I think it was New York, Philadelphia, Miami, a couple of other major ports that Bush wanted to sell. Well, I'm against that. I think it's in the national security and the best thing for our country and the people of our country that we keep control of our ports and not let another country do it. And I don't care who the country is, whether they're in the UAE or Britain or anywhere. We should be controlling. American companies should be controlling our ports. And George Bush, our globalist friend from back there, wanted to sell them. Now, thank God that he was overridden by Congress. Those are the reasons I am an economic nationalist. You will not find a distribution of wealth in today's world with globalism. You will find it with economic nationalism. With that said, I just want to do a quick switch to a recent Homeland Security bulletin that came out earlier this week. And I think it's comical. And right now I'm reading from the New York Post. And it says the Department of Homeland Security's latest terrorism threat includes a warning against the proliferation of false or misleading narratives which sow discord or undermine public trust in U.S. government institutions. The bulletin, issued Monday, is in effect until June 7th of this year, blamed online environment filled with false or misleading narratives and conspiracy theories and other forms of dis, and malinformation introduced and or amplified by foreign and domestic threat actors. These threat actors seek to exacerbate societal friction and to sow discord and to undermine public trust in government institutions, to encourage unrest, which could potentially inspire acts of violence, DHS went on. Mass casualty attacks and other acts of targeted violence conducted by lone offenders and small groups acting in furtherance of ideological beliefs and or personal grievances pose an ongoing threat to the nation. Well, quite frankly, am I a threat? Am I one of these people? I'm not asking people to become violent, but I have lost faith in many of the institutions, and I think many Americans have lost faith in the institutions. Now, are we now criminals or are we now terrorists because we talk about it? And by the mere fact that we talk about it, is that sowing discord? That's problematic. And it's problematic when your federal government puts something out like this. And I just want to fold this into a report that's being spread around mainstream media today. And it says here, it's a report on Christian nationalism. Now, you see the narrative that they're trying to spill. Anything that has the word nationalism is bad. It's bad. And this is going around. And I wouldn't be surprised if this was coordinated with Homeland Security. So they came out on earlier this week with the warning, and now they come out spreading this article here. And let me just read a little bit of it. Released February 9th, 2022. Christian nationalism at the January 6th, 2021 insurrection is a joint project from Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty and the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Now, the FFRF, that's an atheist organization. So you see where we're going here. And what gets me is this is making the mass media rounds, the mainstream media rounds. It says here, the report includes contributions from prominent experts on Christian nationalism. The extensive document begins with a sociological explanation of Christian nationalism in America and the demographics that underline this ideology. It says, survey after survey finds that close to half of Americans are at the very least supportive of the fusion of Christianity with American civic life. Well, what's wrong with that? What is wrong with the fact that a majority of Americans believe that this country was based on Christian values and believe that we should go back and revisit those Christian values that we've lost over the past 40 years? These Americans believe that Christianity should influence our public policies, sacred symbols, and national identity. This research also underscores how white Christian nationalism and Christianity are not one and the same. They explore the different ways Black Christian communities fuse faith and political action. See, this is what they have to do. They have to make a distinction between white and Black. They always have to separate among race. But I'm not surprised. And then what it goes on to say is that, well, they're equating that with white nationalism as opposed to Black Christians who believe that, oh, I'm more open to inclusive. Now, again, I'm just pointing out that why are they separating between races? This is their motive. They want people at each other's throats for the only reason is their race. Quite frankly, this is just, look, it's a disgusting report. They attack Christians for being white supremacists. They're trying to link Christians with the January 6th riot. And to me, it's just obscene. Now, I'm not sure if they coordinated this with CNN because CNN came out with their poll, which said that 56% of respondents said they have little or no confidence that American elections reflect the will of the people, up from 52% who felt that way in September and 40% in January of 2021. Almost 3/4 of Republicans were now skeptical that elections are representative, as were 59% of independents and only 1/3, 32% of Democrats. The results reflected a significant decline in confidence over the past year among independents and Democrats. So are we now a threat? Is CNN a threat because they're discussing it? Now, the problem you have right now in Washington is I think the administration and the bureaucrats, and I think you're finding this out in Canada, do not reflect the will of the people. And the government should not lash out at its citizens. This is a dangerous area we are in right now. And I've been telling people that between now and November, it's an extremely dangerous time for this country because I don't know what these bureaucrats, what these extremists in the government are going to do, as well as the media. Because as both the media and our bureaucracy realizes that they are losing the battle with the American people, they will be capable of doing anything, whether it's clear false reporting, which they've been doing, to creating a crisis in order to avert attention from the fact that they are losing. Okay, I wanted to lead with this story, but it's so fluid and there's so much going on. I just wanted to get as much in as I can for you. And it has to do with our Canadian trucker heroes. And let me give you the latest on what's going on there. We have here is, first thing is the latest that a Canadian judge issued an end to the blockade at the Windsor Bridge, just the Windsor Bridge only. And this was followed up with a state of emergency order by Ontario Premier Doug Ford. And he's pledged new resources for police and new penalties for protesters blocking streets in Ottawa and at the Ambassador Bridge in Windsor. The Ambassador Bridge in Windsor connects Windsor, Ontario with the United States through Detroit. So it says here at a morning press conference, Ford said he understands people are tired of the pandemic and ready to move on, but the blockade at the Ambassador Bridge is costing the economy millions of dollars a day and is leading to job losses in manufacturing plants. I think earlier this week, I think it was a Ford plant in Windsor that had shut down. And then there was Toyota, I think a Toyota plant in the United States. I think it was Kentucky and a couple of other, I think the GM plants had slowed down because they can't get parts from Canada. So that's where we are right now with that. Now, apparently he only has 42 hours to clear the bridge. So we will see what happens there. Now it's funny that the press is reporting that it's only pickups there, and it's not only pickups. If you take a real look at journalists and websites that aren't the mass media, that aren't the drive-by media, you'll see the real true picture, and you'll see that there's a heck of a lot of 18-wheelers there. There may be some pickups there, but the press is trying to make this out to be a small number of trucks and small type of trucks. So we shall see on that. But one thing they're not going to get the military. The military already came out and they told Ottawa to find somebody else to evict the truckers. And let me just read a short article here. It says here, despite the Ottawa police briefly raising the possibility of a military intervention to clear a stubborn holdout of Freedom Convoy truckers blockading their downtown, the Canadian Armed Forces has been quick to say they will be doing no such thing. A spokesperson for the Minister of Defense told the Wall Street Journal on Thursday the Canadian Armed Forces are not involved in law enforcement in this situation, and there are no plans to. And that article was from the National Post in Canada. Now, one thing, and I mentioned this in a previous episode, is that Trudeau can call the military in to help out. But you can't call the military in if you are a premier in one of the provinces. And that's been done. Ironically, Trudeau's father, Pierre, had embedded the military in with police to squash the FLQ uprising. It was a Quebec separatist movement a number of years ago, and they had squashed I think it was an indigenous uprising in one of the provinces up there. So the military has been used in the past, but I just don't think that baby Trudeau or baby Castro, however you want to look at him, has the guts to do this. And it would be a mistake anyway. Imagine how the world would react to that. So with that said, I want to go to a quick clip with our friend Mr. Trudeau, and then we'll get back and discuss.
I've seen members of the opposition call for an end to the blockades. I salute that. This is a time to put national interests ahead of partisan interests.
Well, that was a clip from earlier this week. And guess what, Mr. Trudeau? Members of your own party are calling for an end to the mandates. Now, I'm going to play you an extended clip from an MP from Quebec. And this came out earlier today. His name is Joel Lightbound. So let me play it. And he's had enough. And a couple of things I want you to pick up is what Canada has done to its people. And he's just fed up with it. So let me play it, and then we will come back.
When it comes to the broader demonstrations we've seen in Ottawa, in Quebec City, and all across the country, I will abstain from the kind of generalizations that we've heard these last few days. I've seen on Radio-Canada an interview with what seemed to be a very kind grandmother who demonstrated for her grandkids. She looked and sounded nothing like a white supremacist, nor did the Black, Sikh, and Indigenous Canadians I saw demonstrating on my way to Parliament these last 2 weeks, or in Quebec City this last Saturday. I have enough respect for my fellow Canadians not to engage in these easy and absurd labels.
Well, Mr. Trudeau, Mr. Lightbound just called you out. He called what you're doing absurd in labeling these trucker heroes as racist, and he just called you out on it. And I want to go back to another clip on with Mr. Lightbound, because I'll tell you, I haven't seen a politician clearly identify what has happened here in this country, Canada, and likely throughout the world. This guy has articulated what has gone on for the past 2 years. Let me go back to a clip with him.
I've heard from parents worried to see their kids sink into depression and slowly lose their joy of living. I've heard from pediatricians in tears telling me about their young patients' despair, anxiety, isolation, as well as the stunning increase in school dropouts they are observing. I've heard from social workers answering suicide hotlines who are overwhelmed by the number of calls they're receiving. I've heard from fellow Quebecers who are rightfully appalled that in our province, in 2022, we have locked up kids aged 6 to 10 years old for up to 10 days in windowless rooms. Kids who tested negative, who had no symptoms, who had been in contact with someone, though, who had the virus. So let me repeat. In Quebec, in 2022, we locked up kids aged 6 to 10 for up to 10 days in windowless rooms. Let that sink in.
And you know what Mr. Lightbound just gave us? He gave us the humanity of these lockdowns. He gave us the humanity of these lockdowns that the Johns Hopkins study said did not work. It's done more harm than good. And that's what you get with these woke politicians and these extreme leftists and borderline communists. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if they moved to for a no confidence vote in Parliament. Now, maybe I'm a little hopeful, but let me go back to one more clip with Mr. Lightbound. I think he deserves one more look.
Those making the decisions seem at times to have been blind to the fact that we're not all equal before lockdowns, that not everyone can earn a living on a MacBook at the cottage.
That was clearly a dig at Trudeau, who went into hiding after the truckers came into Ottawa and brought his laptop with him. But it's also indicative of those people that had absolutely no sensitivity to what the lockdowns were going to do to people that worked with their hands, drove trucks, worked in bars, worked in restaurants, because it didn't affect them. Those people that could take their laptops anywhere and work out of their house, oh, they were fine. In America, those people had their assets increase exponentially, but not the working class. And this is Mr. Lightbound has bought out. And this is what Trudeau fails to see or doesn't want to see, because the truckers and the people that work with their hands are below him. And he likely should resign. So Mr. Lightbound goes on to say that it's time. It's time to get rid of all the mandates. And again, I want to thank him because I haven't come across any elected official that has articulated the lockdowns and the effect of the lockdowns than this gentleman up north. And again, I thank you. Okay, let's take a 3-minute break and we'll come back. Okay, welcome back. Just an update. Trudeau had a late afternoon press conference where he said all options are on the table, including military, for whatever that means. So we shall see. It should be an interesting weekend. So let's switch to Russia. Right now, we've got Joe Biden in making a phone call tomorrow, which would be Saturday, to Putin. I don't know what it's going to accomplish. And we have the Senate working on a sanctions bill to sanction Russia in case they invade Ukraine. Now, I certainly hope any sanction bills outweighs the benefit that Russia will get from $120 oil. That's probably will happen if he does invade Ukraine. So, we shall see. It'll be interesting. But one indication of failed policy is when you've got your Secretary of State being a prognosticator on when Russia is going to invade. And let me just read an article here on Anthony Blinken. And it says here, Blinken, Russian invasion of Ukraine could begin. It says, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said Friday that a Russian invasion of Ukraine could begin any time, including during the Beijing Winter Olympics. And the United States continues to see very troubling signs of Russian escalation, including new forces arriving at the Ukrainian border. Well, we've heard the same for the past few weeks. So apparently he has nothing left to say, hasn't done anything that would merit any change in the policy. So we shall see. But what I have heard is some really disturbing news about Blinken. And if you get a chance, you'll have to check out Miranda Devine's article on Blinken and his family and their relation to George Soros. Now, Miranda Devine is a wonderful columnist from the New York Post, and I urge everybody to read her columns if you get a chance. So let me just read a little bit of it. The headline says here is that Anthony Blinken's horrific stain on Albania, and it's all for George Soros. Miranda writes, as if Secretary of State Anthony Blinken weren't embroiled in enough foreign debacles, he now stands accused of meddling in Albanian elections on behalf of billionaire George Soros, and is being sued for defamation in an international court as a result. One of Blinken's curious first actions on taking office last year was to sanction the former president and prime minister of Albania, Sali Berisha, the anti-communist ally of President George H.W. and George W. Bush, who have been in opposition for 8 years, and who is a vocal opponent of Soros and his Open Society Foundation, which has been pushing judicial and electoral reform in Albania. In an official statement and accompanying tweet last April, Blinken alleged that Berisha is a corrupt and had undermined democracy in Albania and barred him, his wife, and 2 children from entering the U.S. Now, Berisha says the sanctions are retaliation for his attempt to declare George Soros persona non grata in Albania after he grew concerned at the influence of Soros's Open Society Foundation on his country. Now, here's the kicker. Matt Palumbo claims in his new book, The Man Behind the Curtain, Inside the Secret Network of George Soros, that Blinken and his family have ties to Soros. He points out the fact that the Secretary of State's father, Donald Blinken, the former U.S. ambassador to Hungary, and his wife Vera, funded the Vera and Donald Blinken Open Society archives at the Central European University in Budapest, which was founded and funded by Soros. Palumbo cites a Soros Foundation Network report from 2002 in which Donald Blinken is listed on the board of trustees for the university, with Soros as the chairman. After Anthony Blinken was confirmed as Secretary of State, Hungarian newspaper, I won't pronounce it, I can't pronounce it, called it great news for George Soros. Now, U.S. Rep. Lee Zeldin from New York, I believe he's running for governor in New York also, he smells a rat and has demanded 3 times from Blinken that Blinken provide evidence to back up his corruption allegations against Berisha. During a House Foreign Affairs Committee meeting last June, Zeldin said the move came seemingly out of nowhere. So, I don't want to hear that we have people in our government that have only the interest of the United States at heart. We've got people in our government who are globalists, who are more loyal to George Soros than to you and to me. And that is why we have a mess right now. Okay, I just want to get into inflation a little bit. I just want to give you some insight into inflation and how we got here. It was a little disturbing, the CPI report that came in on Thursday. It was 7.5%, and I think the expectation was 7.2 or 7.3%. And that's not good. I think it's the highest rate since the early 1980s. And a lot of people ask me, well, how did we get here? And I'm going to simplify it for you. When we had the crash in 2008, what the Fed did is artificially keep low interest rates through just keeping the Fed funds rate low, and then this thing called quantitative easing, where they essentially started buying U.S. government bonds and treasuries and notes and mortgages, collateral mortgages, to artificially keep interest rates low. So their hope was to keep U.S. assets high. And they kept on doing it because it's almost like drugs. You know, once you start taking it, once you start getting into low rates, once you start getting into quantitative easing, it's hard to get off. It's like smoking a cigarette. I hear people that smoke, it's very hard. It's very addictive. Well, that's what low interest rates are. So what I view these rates are is these coals, these embers were just sitting there since 2008, waiting for someone to throw gasoline on them. And what happened is during the time in 2008, the elites of this world kept your salaries down to make sure that inflation wouldn't bubble up. But at some point, that's got to give. And what it did is it gave under Joe Biden. Now, we were slowly getting back to normalcy under Donald Trump, and that was before the pandemic hit. And we probably would have been normalized by now, which means that interest rates would have gone up to a normal place. Stock market would have been normalized, not at levels we see now. And it just didn't happen because of the pandemic. So what happened is that it took Joe Biden to throw gasoline on our economy in order to create this level of inflation. Now, what happened is that Joe Biden's American Rescue Plan was that gasoline. Prior to that, we had there was 2 or 3 different stimulus checks that went out to the American people. Now, that was just to keep Americans afloat during the lockdown. But this American Rescue Plan was implemented when the rebound was happening. Now, everybody, remember, again, Trump was right. Everybody said, oh, Trump, you're crazy, when he said it was going to be a V-shaped recovery. They laughed at him. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, guess what? It is a V-shaped recovery. And the Biden people didn't listen. As usually, their critical mistake was to do everything the opposite of what Donald Trump did. And that's immature. This American Rescue Plan threw so much money back into the economy when it wasn't needed. And because of that, you've had all this cash that has been thrown into the economy over the years, just waiting for the gasoline. And the gasoline was the American Rescue Plan. It gave people another stimulus check, and it threw billions and billions of dollars at states, municipalities, counties to use just to spend. And all this spending creates inflation. And this is where we are now. And Biden's people didn't want to listen. Now, this is why I think it's going to continue. Now, remember, the Fed said, oh, this is just transitory. This isn't just transitory. Well, they were wrong. It was a terrible policy decision. It was wrong. So now what we have is we've got this infrastructure plan, massive infrastructure plan. And that money from that infrastructure plan hasn't even hit the streets yet. So once we see the money, and it's probably not going to hit the streets until later this year or sometime next year, you're going to continue to have more money thrown into the economy. And you'll see inflation continue. I'll be surprised if we get back to 3%. I just don't think that we may hit that. And I'm just not too optimistic about inflation right now. Now, there's some things that the Republicans can do, hopefully, once they get back in power in November. I'll talk about that at later episodes. Just remember, Biden threw gasoline into these burning embers, and that's what's caused this. It's pretty simple. I always find that the simplest answer is usually the correct answer. And you'll get these people on CNBC, on all these talking heads trying to convolute everything. They're only talking because they get paid for it. They get paid to convolute everything. So anyway, that's where we are with inflation. I hope I was helpful with that. Let's talk about stocks for a minute or two. Today's Friday, and the Dow fell 503 points, or 1.43%. Year to date, the Dow is down 4.4%. NASDAQ fell today 2.78%, and year to date, the NASDAQ is down 11.85%. S&P fell 1.9%, and year to date, the S&P is down 7.29. Oil hit a 7-year high. It's up to 93.90, and that's a 4.47% increase for the day. And this is all being driven apparently by everybody's fearing that Russia's going to attack Ukraine. It's going to cause oil to go up. As you'll see, it will drive the price of the 10-year bond down as people want to go to a more stable environment. So they put money back into the United States, and they usually put it into treasuries. So it affects both the U.S. currency and the 10-year bond. So speaking of the 10-year bond today was down 11 basis points. That's a lot. to 1.918%. Gold was up 1.26% to 1,860.60. Silver was up 0.33% to $23.60. In cryptocurrency, Bitcoin was down 3.84% to $42,405.96. Ethereum was down 5.02% to $2,953.29. And XRP was down 8.06% to 78 cents. Twitter missed their earnings this week. Good. Twitter went from a high of $41.10 for the week and finished up at $35.84. Now let's take a 1-minute break and then I'll be back. Okay, just a couple of tidbits before I go for the weekend. Let's look at Joe Biden's poll. I'm looking at CNN's most recent poll. It says here nearly 6 in 10 Americans disapprove of how Joe Biden is handling his presidency, with most of that group saying there's literally nothing Biden has done since taking office that they approve of. And again, this is CNN's poll, so you know it's skewed to benefit Biden. So even with their poll, this is a disaster, well-deserved disaster. It says here the president's ratings have fallen across the board. The survey found just 41% approved of the way he's handling his job, while 58% disapproved, a significant drop from his approval numbers in the last year. Just 36% of independents and 9% of Republicans approved. Now, the independent number is key, just 36%. Because the Republicans and Donald Trump in 2022 and then in 2024, respectively, are going to need the independents. And they are the ones that will make or break the elections. So only 36% approve of of Biden. Although his approval rating still stood at 83% among Democrats, that was down from 94%. So he's also losing Democrats. And dollars to donuts, those are African Americans and Latinos. Now, I think you've already got the Latino exodus baked into their methodology, but they don't have the black vote baked into their methodology. I'm almost guaranteed that that's the African American fall off. Listen, nothing else to say. It's a disaster for Joe Biden. Unfortunately, it's a disaster for us as Americans. And we shall see. I just don't see these numbers going up. I see everything pointing to continued headwinds for Biden, and he has the inability to address these headwinds, him along with his administration. So let's go to the next thing I wanted to talk about, and this has to do with Biden. I don't know if somebody had a sense of humor or it was a bad joke, but how could the administration come out and say they are going to give crack pipes, free crack pipes to crack addicts, when the president's son is a crackhead? That's just tone deaf. I just don't get that. It just shows the incompetence of this administration. You've got the president of the United States with a crackhead son, yet they're going to give free crack pipes out to American crackheads. I just don't get that. Now, I know Jen Psaki has denied it, but my spidey senses tell me that they got caught and they were just trying to deny it. So with that said, I just wanted to add one last thing before I go. It looks like Connecticut, New York, Delaware, California, Oregon, and Washington State have also stopped the mask mandates, or at least have been scheduled to stop the mask mandate. So it looks like the Canadian truckers are having some kind of effect here, and and they're smart. I get a kick out of these talking political scientists that you see on MSNBC and CNBC and CNN, how they just suddenly turned to going from whatever their masters tell them. And one of I think it was Dr. Wen. At some point, maybe I'll do a clip of her in the future. I think it's hilarious how I saw a clip of her over the years, how she just changed her narrative to reflect the politics. It's hilarious. Here is a doctor that is just enamored with being on TV. And she will say anything to stay on TV. And the sad thing is that she is telling us she's an expert, when in reality, she's just a political scientist. So anyway, with that said, have a good weekend, and I will see you early next week. Bye-bye.